Everything changes because people get older. I was 18 when I started here. Now I'll be 70 in July, so things change, develop with friends and people and working and whatnot. In 1962, the Association for Mentally Retarded Children started, but the workshop itself didn't start till October 5th of 1964. Our workshop manager here at the time was Stan Krinkla, and we worked from 9 till, I think it was 9 till 3:30. It was a place to come and have some structure in my life. It was called the St. Mary's and District Occupational Training Center. We had a contract with DeLong Scoville. We did salvage pins. We put pins on pins. We put pins on clips and a bunch of other stuff. I grew up here, so I've enjoyed town. Well, right now we're going down the street here to what was known at one time as the old post office. We got a green light. Buildings are the same, but the businesses aren't. Things evolve, so you can't stop progress. Oh, Barb.
Hello, Richard.
Well, right now I'm standing in front of the old St. Mary's post office. Our workshop manager here was Dorothy Nielsen. Workshop was expanding, doing all kinds of stuff. Then in 1967 we started up at the new James Fruity Center on Ingersoll Street.
Well, I was playing bridge with Jessie McKillop, who was instrumental in the Ontario Association being started. And she used to talk a lot about what went on here. And I thought that it was something that I could do that might help out a bit. Well, I volunteered in the workshop here and did whatever Al or Joan told me to do.
Well, we started in the basement doing the woodworking and whatnot. I made roosters and carts, donkeys and carts, picnic tables, chairs.
These are two of the products that were produced in James Produce Center when we were at this location. And they were made in approximately 1977. So they are 40 years old and they've stood the test of time, just like the three of us.
1975, Al Bennett was hired as a workshop manager here. It was good to work for Al because he had a lot of humor and he respected everybody he met.
Well, I just remember Al as being such a special person. He could look at an individual and he didn't see boundaries. He saw the abilities of people. People were coming from further out in the country and we were identifying needs of people.
Well, we definitely started to outgrow that place, so we began to think about how we might move, and the Kinsmen were very supportive. They agreed to do the fundraising for us, and that was quite an amazing job to take on.
We had lots of support from local people. We had new markets, we had new products. We had lots of space to develop new things, and we started hiring more staff to make those things happen.
They sold the property that we were occupying here and donated that money to the new building.
We did various things here. We planted an asparagus garden. We built picnic tables here for years, and we made wooden toys. A lot of folks have spent a lot of time here. The way things have changed. A bit, eh?
This used to be a loading dock.
Yes.
Listen, you can hear yourself in this room now. It used to be so noisy with all the woodworking equipment.
Richard reminded us that there was a dust collector outside
Yes.
for the woodworking equipment that was in here. And there was a paint room over in the far side for finishing. Yeah, so this was Terry, right, Joan?
Here.
And yeah, she worked in the wood shop, and she was hammering a leather tail on one of the toys. Yeah, so we worked with people like Terry to help them move into independence. We wanted to get people, instead of assembling something here, why not have them assembling it in the factory where other people were working so they could meet other people. It took us a while to get to that point. We did kind of a protected industry approach where we got fairly industrial with woodworking.
Okay, we're standing in front of the Tamac Mall. I'm not sure when it was built, but it's a short little strip mall that catered to commercial activities. It had a certain amount of space in it that was really quite useful for the wood shop, because we were planning to expand and we needed more space for more machines, high-tech machines. We were taking on contracts that were related to furniture pieces that went into like Krug and Krahler furniture. We got rid of the picnic tables because it was a loss, and we concentrated on industrial production.
It was like we were, I don't know, stepping into an exciting new time when people were given more credit and being brought back to the community and learning new skills, and there was a lot of training went on. We had an awful lot of fun.
In 1986, the focus in the contract room was changing, and we were looking into employment.
So in 1982, I came to be a student with Lori in the contract room, and what an experience that was. I learned a ton from the people who were moving home from institutions. There was a growing acknowledgement that people with disabilities could be and were good workers, right? Good employees, and that it was right to be supporting people to get jobs in community.
A number of people that we supported were taught how to clean houses, so they were in people's homes, making relationships.
The cleaning program was a bridge to the community, so it was like that, taking people out of this building and putting them into jobs in the community. And it was fairly successful that way, I think. And then people started working at other employment in the town at various other locations through the supported employment program.
Well, there was some decision not to operate the wood shop anymore. I was part of that for different reasons. I was part of it because what I noticed is that people here actually were good workers. And I thought, well, if they're good workers here, they can be good workers anywhere. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what we did. One person at a time, we found opportunities that they chose to do, because how many people would actually choose to work in a shelter workshop? And the answer is, they haven't got a choice. We did what's I called back then a paradigm shift. But really what it meant was stop focusing on the program and start focusing on the person.
Back years ago, I used to work for a fellow in Woodham by the name of Bernie McCormick, pumping gas, cleaning up the shop and whatnot. And he kept telling me, he says, I wish you had your driver's license. And I said, well, what for? He said, well, I'd send you for parts. My support worker took me over to Stratford and I got my driver's license. So when I got back to where I was working at the time, I got out of the car and told my boss, I said, I got my driver's license. He said, good, get in the truck and go to Saunders.
That fast.
that quick.
The first ministry-funded residential programs in St. Mary's started in 1981, but there were things happening for people getting supports in their homes long before 1981. So these stories represent what can happen when a community comes together and figures out where someone needs some assistance and how they're going to provide it for them.
Father Gervais was speaking about community. They have a place in St. Mary's that they've been running as a novitiate. The place needs some attention and so on. Maybe that would be a good place for your people to go and start this idea of communal living. So he brought this up at a meeting at our house, and we said, let's go up now and take a look. We called social services in London. A lady came out. She brought Jack Tabner out to us from London. Jack had some problems vocally and a little bit physically. We lived together without one person moving for 5 years. There are a lot of benefits in living in community other than saving money and getting to know one another much better and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, this place was where my brother Ken lived for a few years. Yeah, Ken liked his basement apartment. And this is where you went in to go into his apartment. Well, he was on his own and he liked it here, and he had his own routine. Yeah, it was the volunteers and friends that helped Ken make the adjustment for living there by himself after our parents passed away.
The house behind us has 4 apartments in it, and 1 or 2 of those apartments over the years were rented to 2 of the people who got support through the Supported Independent Living program.
Well, that place there behind us was where I first moved from home. I had help from a support worker, my family moving in. After the first couple of weeks of being in my own apartment, I got myself a car, I got myself a girlfriend, and then the apartment and everything else.
People got support to do things like learn how to cook, learn how to house clean, learn how to do banking. All the things that we all have to learn when we move out of our family's home in the beginning. There were 9 people who got support from usually 2 to about 6 hours a week on average.
You were on all kinds of committees. You knew at some point we were going to want a residential service. Ministry of Community and Social Services announced there was going to be some residential funding coming out. They were going to pick a couple of projects from around our region, and it didn't necessarily look like we were going to get it. I think you brought all of your force to bear.
They told us we couldn't have an executive director because we weren't big enough.
It was just a
and
workshop.
It was just a workshop. So we hired Bud anyway and just put it in our budget, and they just paid it, and we never heard anything more about it.
Didn't ask for permission.
No, we know better than anybody else what we need and what we don't need, and if we think we need that person to make it work for us, then it's important for the people that we're serving that they have the right structure there to help them. So Bud was it.
We were wanting to make apartments available for people, and I think the ministry thought the people that that they wanted to see supported couldn't live in apartments, because we were talking about bringing people back from institutions and that kind of thing. When we went to the institutions as well, the social workers there would say, we don't have anybody here that could live in an apartment. And so we were going against the grain.
That was one of the things that we wanted to do, was serve people whose home was here or whose family were here.
I think one of the earlier places was Midwestern Regional Center. I remember going up there with Marilyn Haywood and asking the social workers who was from St. Mary's that were living there, and they wouldn't even tell us. And so I remember distracting the social worker, and they had all information about people on bulletin boards and things, and that's how we found the names of some people. We had to eventually put advertisements in our local newspaper. People came forward from nursing homes that let us know about people from their family, and when we'd find out about somebody, we would work with the family to kind of help figure out how to get the person back here. Remember Brian giving him his key to his apartment. The absolute pride that Brian and other people had. People in their own apartment had the opportunity to participate in making their meals and in laundry and all kinds of things like that, where in a larger setting in a group home, it's more difficult for people to do their normal daily kinds of activities. We were really growing in our understanding about the need for people to have relationships and be connected to their community. Marilyn Haywood, who was the residential manager here, was a leader in that philosophy, and that was about the same time where we were putting an end to some of the things that were segregated, like the sheltered workshop, and helping people get out and get jobs in the community, and just realizing that relationships were what this was all about.
When I was hired, well, I was still going to school, and I was hired to get to know a fellow who lived at in St. Thomas at Start Center, Bill. And Bill and I were the same age, and I knew his family because our dads were friends. My job was to go and spend time with Bill and get to know him and to make a plan, because what we wanted to do was to support his family, to have him move back to town. Bill was a young guy. I think we were both like 21 or 22, something like that. But Bill had lived away from home from the time he was 6. And so the purpose was for me to get to know Bill, to develop a plan that would work for him so that he could move into this building. Eventually, they allowed me to take Bill out of the institution. Then we talked about having him come for visits, which he did do. He would come for 2 days at a time, so one overnight for the first while, and then eventually he moved. The spending time with Bill and helping his family have him move from the institution here was just so important. And in terms of the association, Bill was somebody who needed a lot of support, and people didn't believe that he should move from an institution. There were lots of people who didn't believe that. His family believed it, the people around here believed it, I believed it, the association obviously did, but Bill needed a lot of support, and people didn't think that people like Bill could live in community. And we proved them wrong, and we kept on proving them wrong, and we continue to prove them wrong. Bill eventually did get moved out, which was wonderful, and he had a very long, good life here in St. Mary's.
It was all new for everybody, so that they were trusting us to give them the right information and to help them make the right decision. But they couldn't look at any other places to see how it had worked or anything. They were taking it as they got it from us, and so it was really faith that it would work out. We just always seemed to have had boards that really wanted to do the right thing, that were not afraid to be a little bit different.
Barb, you're, I think, the most determined person I've ever met. The board was led by Barb, and Helen Watson's, was our regional representative. She was providing support to this whole region, but this was where things were happening that she really was excited about. So we had resources of people like Helen and John and George that really focused here because they were really excited. This stuff wasn't happening in every agency.
It's important to have staff and board and volunteers, and when we've had weekends away where we were going to have a learning experience, we've tried to have community members attend as well. And I can remember people saying to me, well, that if they don't work for you and they're not a volunteer for the association, why would you have them? It's because they're going to learn, and they may tell someone else, or they may decide themselves that they would like to help. And so it's, when you learn about something, you're much less likely to be negative about it. So the more people learned, the more positive they were.
I think we were able to really move our services to be attuned to the individual's needs, right from planning with the person and including other people, family members in the planning, identifying the resources attached to that person. When we moved from our budgets being a blanket program budget to individualizing those budgets in 1984, we found a 20% bump in our ability to provide more services at that time because we were being more effective.
We are standing in front of a building, 155 Park Street, that Community Living purchased in 1983. When Community Living bought it, it really needed a lot of renovation. So I believe it was gutted, and they put 4 apartments in it for 4 people that were coming to live from Blue Water Center. Community Living had a building with 6 apartments, and they had done really well with that experiment or whatever, so they decided to do a second building with 4 more people from our community. 4 people from Blue Water came in December 1983, and this apartment building wasn't ready, so they moved into a house that Community Living bought at Church Street across from the bowling lanes. This is Linda Edwards. She came from Blue Water in '83. And she moved here. She had a roommate, and it left 1 apartment empty. Linda and her roommate did not get along very well. It wasn't anyone's fault, they just didn't mesh. So Linda moved upstairs into her own apartment. I remember Linda having her own morning support so that it was consistent with 1 staff, and she'd have her own evening support, the same all the time, so it would be the consistency.
At first, someone up at Blue Water said it wouldn't work, but it worked. She would come back to St. Mary's, shared a room with Linda. Well, Anne was a lot closer to home. I could just go in and bring her out to the farm for an afternoon, or she'd come out for supper. And then they got the Park Street apartment. And then Anne went to the workshop every day. It was such a beautiful place for her to be, better than Church Street. You know what I mean? Because she had her own apartment. She had her own little kitchen, bathroom. She shared a room with Ethel, and she got along fine.
There were lots of people who had lots of needs for support. The association never said, that person's too difficult, too hard to support, we can't do that, we don't know how. Instead, they always said, let's get to know the person and let's figure this out. That's still happening today. People never turn people away based on how much support they might need or do need, but always try to figure out who is this person and how we're going to figure it out together.
I was the volunteer coordinator from 1981 to 1984. Volunteers made this place run. At least 2 people were here every day, helping make pies, teaching people life skills, and keeping people busy 9 to 5. A lot of people weren't very happy, didn't have enough to do on weekends and in the evenings. I wrote an article for the Journal Argus explaining that we just hired a volunteer coordinator, myself, and that we were looking to match people up. And I'm sure within a week I had 15 to 20 people, which I thought was overwhelming, and it was great. I didn't believe we'd get such a response. The volunteer coordinator program carried on until 1986, and after that, a group called Citizen Advocacy kind of took over, matching people up. Well, I met Marilyn before I was hired as the volunteer coordinator. For some reason, we just clicked. We're both loud and bossy. Marilyn makes me laugh. The gift that Marilyn gives to our family, it's just immeasurable.
I known Kathy, since I worked here up at the Purdue Center. We've been friends all along, and we're still friends. We're not breaking that off, because Kathy don't want to, so.
No. We were quite the twosome.
Yep.
We are quite the
Yep.
twosome.
Yeah, we are.
Al Bennett was the manager at the time. So it was a very small group. I think there were likely more volunteers than there were staff at that time, for sure. They made pies and tarts and all kinds of other things, but tuna casserole was my forte. I think we need to get back to having more people volunteer, because it's good. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel as if you're contributing something, I think, to society. And I think it's important that people find their niche and get out there and volunteer.
It was community development, getting people who had a little bit of difficulty in getting linked into the community, which really wasn't about fixing the people who weren't connected, but about fixing the people who were, to accept everybody. Sitting right here is Shirley, who was matched fairly quickly with my daughter Sarah. And now, even though they live far apart, neither one forgets the other.
I've worked for community living since 1984, and I would have heard about citizen advocacy and thought, well, that might be an interesting volunteer activity or something to get involved with, and then would talk to someone like Al here.
I twisted his arm is what I did.
And it worked.
My involvement primarily was in the fundraising, and I was the treasurer for the whole time. Yeah. I did all the books by hand.
The association, for instance, has gone from having training to get people ready for employment and a whole lot of stuff like that to saying, look, the community here has got to find a place for everybody in the community. But that doesn't mean that the work of citizen advocacy can ever be done.
I became a volunteer actually in the school first, because my kids were at school. But then I played bridge with the lady who was the original chair of this association and who helped to start the Ontario Association as well. And so I found it very interesting to see how many people there were that were working very hard to make sure that their kids could have a life the same as all the other kids.
You know, it goes back a long way, my experience and my time with community living in St. Mary's, probably back to when I was a child, and you know, I was fortunate enough to have a neighbor with developmental disabilities. I came to volunteer with community living on the Children's Services Committee. So it was kind of important that children's services were being met within the community, and clearly, it had been identified in the province that those services weren't being met all over the place. So, you know, there was a need for nursery school programs, and education was being looked at. Where was that going to go? And at that time, Bill 82 was being proposed, and which was going to finally oblige boards of education to educate all children within the province of Ontario, not just those children who came within the spectrum of what would seem at that time to be, you know, easily educated or normally educated.
In the early years, the Children's Services Committee was trying to find out the need for the town of St. Mary's as far as children being integrated into a nursery school program.
We're at the West Ward School at the west end of St. Mary's, which was, and until recently, was a daycare center for children in St. Mary's. And our son, Gregory, was the first child to attend here as an integrated childcare recipient. The program actually began in November '81. My son, Greg, began that program then. It was critical for Greg's well-being, and we also wanted Greg to be part of the community. So whatever program that was developed, we wanted Greg to be part of that, so he grew up with his peers.
Where do you want to go on a holiday, on a big holiday, Laura?
Italy.
Laura, did you like going to nursery school? Did you?
Yeah.
What do you remember? What do you remember about it? Help?
I remember playing with the other kids at nursery school. They included me to play.
I think it was important for the children. I think it was also important for the parent just to have a couple hours respite, because it's a hard job with a special needs child. But I think it's equally as important for the community to realize that they're real people. And I think the younger we start that, the better it is.
Lily asked me to sit on the committee to get the mobility bus going so people with special needs could have transportation.
You know, it started out as a dream, and then when we realized that there was a possibility of getting funding to assist us, if we could come up with part of the money, it became more of a reality. The whole community was involved. I was the home support coordinator for home support services for St. Mary's and area. So I looked after coordinating the programs such as Meals on Wheels, Wheels 2 Meals, Friendly Visiting, Telephone Reassurance, Shopping Bus, transportation services, even with all of the volunteers that were incredibly wonderful. There was just not anything out there to assist people if they had mobility problems. That's where the mobility bus became so exciting, because people were able to get out that couldn't get out before.
I go doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, medical clinics. I go to the Friendship Center on Tuesdays with my friend Bernice.
I think the work of our association will never be finished. I think you can always do better than you're doing, and you just have to look for those new ways of going about things, which is what we seem to be good at, so we just can't give that up. We have to keep trying to bring as many changes to this whole part of life as we can.